I'm Adrienne Pedersen. Today on Upfront, Senator Ron Johnson, the next coronavirus relief package, the investigation of Hunter Biden, and Democrats charges the Russians may be using him for propaganda.
My question is, what are Democrats afraid of in my investigation?
I'll ask him about all of it in an extended interview. Plus, the governor's gamble.
My job as governor is to put people first, to do what's best for the people of our state.
A new statewide mask mandate. Would a legal challenge have a different outcome this time?
Taking on the issues important to Wisconsin. This is Upfront with your host, Adrienne Pedersen.
Thank you for joining us. People relying on COVID relief money to help make ends meet face a tough situation right now. The last relief package, which provided a $600 per week jobless benefit, ran out Friday, and top officials in Washington have been unable to reach agreement on a new one. Wisconsin Democratic Senator Tammy Baldwin says it's a critical moment for families.
We have kept many families out of poverty. Had they been without a federal supplement to their unemployment insurance, they would have fallen into poverty because of the pandemic and no fault of their own.
Republicans and Democrats are divided over how much to spend. Wisconsin Republican Senator Ron Johnson offered his own plan, which would provide benefits ranging from $200 to $500 a week to people out of work since coronavirus hit. Senator Johnson joins us now on Upfront, and we have a lot to talk about. So I want to get back to coronavirus relief in just a minute, but first I want to ask you about President Trump questioning delaying the election in a tweet. He called universal mail-in voting fraudulent. Do you want to delay the election?
No, I don't think anybody is really seriously considering doing that. I think we do need to be very aware of the fact that a massive increase in mail-in voting creates some real problems. I mean, take a look what's happening right now in New York. We've seen this in other jurisdictions where the results of elections aren't known for weeks after the election. That's going to pose a very serious problem if we don't get a lot of these election jurisdictions under control here. So it's a very serious issue that President Trump is raising. I don't think anybody wants to delay the election.
And you don't think he wants to delay it either?
My guess is he's raising the issue, and it's a very legitimate concern that he has.
So do you think the president will accept the results of the election even if he doesn't win?
Yes. But again, we need to be very concerned at what's happening in other jurisdictions where mail-in balloting was in much larger volumes than we've ever seen in the past. How that's going to play out after the election.
And getting to
we need rules, we need controls, and those need to be put in place right now.
Getting to the coronavirus relief package, I know you put out your own bill. What's the timeline here? When do you think something will get done on this? People are about to lose their benefits.
Well, again, I certainly recognize that, which is why I went on the floor of the Senate yesterday asking for a unanimous consent to pass an extension of a federal plus-up in unemployment benefits. I do want everybody to realize they'll still get their state unemployment benefits. I thought it was appropriate to recognize the fact that it's nobody's fault that they're unemployed right now. This is because of COVID, and we wanted to help. But in the CARES package, we passed a $600 plus-up, which, depending on which study you look at, either 68% or 5 out of 6 individuals, according to CBO, are making more in unemployment than they made actually on their job. Now, that's a perverse incentive to keep people out of the economy, and we need workers coming back into the economy as safely as possible so we can start creating the opportunity and start recovering from this COVID recession. So I think we want to help people financially, but we have to do it at an appropriate level so people aren't incentivized to stay on unemployment and are actually incentivized to get back in the workforce.
But if one of your concerns is that people then won't look for a job, isn't that one of the requirements of unemployment benefits, is to be looking for a job?
The problem is right now those requirements aren't being enforced. The levels of unemployment have so overwhelmed state unemployment systems. Nobody's checking. Even when an employer goes to an employee and say, "You got a job back, come on back in," that should automatically disqualify somebody from unemployment benefits. But none of that's happening right now.
Are there even jobs to be had right now, considering so many things are still closed or struggling?
Well, the last statistic we have on that is from the end of May. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, there were 5.4 million jobs open and unfilled. I don't know what the end of June is going to be looking like. We'll know those numbers in probably a few days here. But no, I think when I talk to employers who are trying to open back up, that are trying to, start operating at 100% capacity, their biggest problem is they can't bring people back out of the unemployment lines or out of the unemployment system. So we do need to bring people back in the workplace.
I think people are frustrating, feeling like Washington cannot come together on this when it's for the greater good. What's the timeline? When could we see something passed?
Well, part of the problem is so many members of Congress that just don't look at the numbers. One of the things I've been trying to point out is when we've passed our fourth package back at the end of April, we'd already allocated somewhere between 2.9, according to testimony in front of my committee, maybe up to $3.6 trillion. So we've already passed and authorized spending at 13.5 to 16.8% of our economy within weeks, not even a month after we'd already done that. Nancy Pelosi passed another $3 trillion, which would put that spending amount closer to 30% of our economy. That's a grotesque level of spending. It's not necessary, and that's part of the problem. So what we should be doing is we should be doing oversight. We should find out what worked, what didn't work, and we passed this fast. We knew it was going to be far from perfect, so let's try and fix some of these things, and let's spend the additional $1.2 trillion better, more targeted, more effectively, before we even think of authorizing another dime.
So are you saying you don't think that there will be another coronavirus relief package?
Not anytime soon.
I want to switch gears a little bit. Some other news that happened. A Democratic-backed group called the Congressional Integrity Project accuses you of advocating for policies that would benefit you financially. So the report says you broke a campaign pledge to create a blind trust for the plastics company you owned, and that you lobbied for tax changes that would help the company. So I want to know from you, is that true?
No, I mean, and it's based on false reports that double counted assets. What I did, first of all, it makes no sense to put a privately held company, my ownership of that, into blind trust. I mean, the whole point of blind trust is you can do trading in and out of that trust. What I did for marketable securities, I did one better than a blind trust. I converted it all to cash. There's no conflict of interest with cash. So I've just been sitting on cash for most of my assets outside my ownership in the company that I started. And as a result, I lost, I didn't participate in more than a doubling of the stock market during my first 6 or 7 or 8 years in Congress. And more recently, when I did sell my 5% ownership stake in an private equity sale that took over 2 years to do, rather than reinvest that in the stock market when I knew I could have made a lot of money because I figured the stock market would snap back, I just kept it in cash because I didn't want anybody complaining about the fact that I was taking advantage of the economic situation. So I have lost huge sums of money by staying in cash and staying out of the market by and large.
So that report also says that they believe that you've increased your wealth 50 to 100% while you've been in office. Why do you think the Democrats are doing this to you?
Because I'm investigating corruption in the Obama administration, and they're afraid of what the results of that investigation is. So what they're doing is they're targeting me, trying to destroy me so that any results of my investigation will also be marginalized. But again, it's completely false. My net worth has not grown by that amount. There's some just oddities in terms of how we report things based on ranges. For example, let's say you have a money market that's worth almost $5 million. That's categorized 1 to 5 million. If it slightly goes over 5 million, all of a sudden you're in a category of 5 to 25, and they assume that your net worth increased $20 million. I mean, nothing could be further from the truth. And in addition to that, even though we pointed this out to the reporter, they double counted a number of my assets. So it falsely drove up what they were even looking at. So these things are miscalculated. They're using false information, and they know it's false, and yet they still push it. That is why not enough good people actually run for office. It's such a vicious process. It's so dishonest. But that's the way it is. I accept that.
Okay, Senator, so we have to take a quick break right now, but we will have more of this interview coming up next on Upfront.
Upfront, brought to you by WPS Health Insurance.